Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore. Boggy Talk is recorded on Boggy Bayou in Niceville, Florida, and is hosted by Justin Wyatt and James Ross, pastors at Church on Bayshore. We typically want every matter of faith and life to have crystal clear answers, but it isn't always that easy. This podcast digs in to help Christians think with a kingdom mentality about topics that sometimes get muddy and bog us down. So let's dive in.
Hey, and welcome to Boggy Talk. We are so thankful that you've joined us today for week 3 of our series on fear. Before we dive in, I'm saying hey to co-host James Ross. How you doing, man?
I am doing well.
How's this September?
It is good. Yeah. I love this time of year.
It's
things
good.
are cooling off. Football's going. Florida-Alabama game. I was at that this past weekend.
Woo!
And it's just it's good. So baseball
Yes.
unfortunately does not exist to me this year.
That's right.
So your shirt
But
sucks.
I'm wearing the Braves shirt, and
Yeah.
you're a Cubs fan, so
We're done. We've been done for a while. We gave up this year.
We thought the Braves were done, and they have rallied, and it's been fun to watch. At least at the time of recording, they're doing great.
Yeah, that's right.
So hopefully they haven't tanked it. But so hope we're looking at the playoffs, and if our recent series against the Dodgers is any indication, we won't make it very far in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But hey, it's still fun to cheer for the Braves, and it's fun for us as a family because the kids get into it. It's good.
My kids, baseball, they're like, that's
Well, I think what they like about it, like our kids like, is they can do other stuff and watch baseball at the
got
same,
it.
because there's times
Don't
where it's
miss
just some
anything.
downtime.
Yeah.
And then it's like when something cool happens, they
That's
hear
true.
the fans, and then they're like, oh, and it's all good.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well,
But-
anyway, I will tell you that, man, I'm ready for COVID to be done.
yes.
It is. I'm ready.
Yeah,
I'm
it
ready for it to
is.
be done.
It is done. And that's, speaking of COVID and masks, that's what we're talking about today is masks. And, I heard a church leader talk about masks, and he was sharing with their church another change that their church was making. And it was really funny because they had just announced a policy. Then like 2 weeks later, announced a different policy, and he just stood up there with a mask in his hand, and he said, our goal as church leaders, we decided that before this thing is over, our goal would be to offend everyone with every decision we make.
gosh.
And really, because everyone's
funny.
got an opinion about things, and that makes it a little more complicated. And I think, at least generally here in our church, I'm thankful that people have had a pretty generous attitude towards
I know.
each other.
I'm
And-
actually surprised.
yeah. Why are you surprised?
I just really thought that we would be given a way more of a hard time, about all this. But, I don't know. It hasn't been that bad. Maybe people just think there's no point in trying to convince
I think
change my
people think a
mind.
lot of different things, and I think the other day I was wearing a mask here in service, and somebody was like, "Oh, are you feeling?" I was like, "Well, honestly, I want to wear this because I think as a leader, I want other people who maybe want to wear a mask feel like they see
Yeah,
someone in
right.
leadership wearing it." But
Because
two,
James.
that was not what I was saying.
That's
I was
what
like,
you
it's
said.
just important, and I honestly, it's not a big deal. to me.
DeSantis
That's
Jr.
right.
over there. I think am I older than DeSantis?
I don't know. I think he's in his 40s.
Oh, okay.
I think he's in his 40s.
I'm not as old as
he's
you
more
guys.
my age.
I'm not as old as you guys.
But so masks cover us up, and today we were talking about
You had it going in the right direction, and then I just got you.
DeSantis. But masks. As a kid, we were doing a series on fear, and we were based it off of things that people are afraid of, and specifically like kids and fears that kids have. We talked about fear of the dark, fear of unknown, and now strange noises. And today, fear of masks. And I distinctly remember as a child going to a church, with my parents, going to one of their Sunday school parties, and this guy wearing a werewolf mask.
No.
Yeah, at a church. Can you imagine?
Wow.
I mean, it makes me think of the old Saturday Night Live. Could it be Satan?
I mean,
had
he had a Harry Potter mask
Right,
on or
I
a
mean-
SpongeBob mask, it'd have been like, no, get that off.
But yeah, it
werewolf.
was and I was so scared. I remember being so scared. And then he even took the mask off and showed me who he was, and I knew who it was. I don't remember who it is now, but I remember I knew who he was, and I was like, get away. Masks are scary to
Weirdo.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Why would you do that to a kid at a Sunday school party? People are weird. People are weird. But masks are scary because you don't know what's beneath the mask. You know, horror movies are all based mostly on characters wearing some kind of mask. Start with, Jason in Friday the 13th and the Scream guy, Ghostface and Scream. And then, it continues on because masks hide what's really beneath. And so, that segue. That's right. So as we talk about masks, we're afraid of people in masks as adults, but it's not that they're wearing a physical mask. We're talking about the mask that people wear to cover up who they really are. Talking about really hypocrisy. When we present one way to one group of people or to one person, and then we, in reality, take off the mask, and that's who we really are. So, remember, the word hypocrite means literally, like the origin of this word is literally someone who wore a mask, who was presented, who was one way, and then take off the mask, they're actually somebody else. Yeah,
I know that not everyone listening is a Bible scholar, but I think maybe you can understand that back in the days of Jesus, the entertainment was a little more low grade than it is today.
Well, I think we got some pretty low grade entertainment.
It's
today.
True.
It's just through technology.
I meant quality wise, So that's true. That's true. Speaking of low grade entertainment, Boggy Talk. Anyway,
looking for sponsors.
Yeah. So basically, if you were playing a different part, you just put a mask on, and you literally be wearing the same clothes, right? And just have a different mask.
Yes, mask and change your voice.
In your one man show that you did,
and my off Broadway production of my
Christy
life.
Wyatt has it on video. She hasn't shown me yet, but you just keep putting masks on.
Yeah, just different masks.
So you're playing a part, right? You put a mask on to play a part, and really that's the word hypocrites, in the Bible is hey, these people who are putting a mask on to play a part, and Jesus is accusing, and others are accusing people of being hypocrites, and I certainly think that still exists today.
And you talked about this a few weeks ago, on Sunday mornings with the passage about the woman who was bleeding and Jairus, however you want to say his name, Jairus. Really about, Jesus only saves broken people because that's the only kind of people there are, and like how we just like to pretend we're not broken. Yeah.
Well, why do we pretend we're not broken? Why do we wear masks, Justin Wyatt?
Well, I wear masks for 3 reasons. I think the real reason we wear masks is because we're afraid. We're afraid for people. I think there's a fear of rejection, that if people saw who we really are, our real struggles, that they wouldn't want to be around us or know us or love us. So there's a fear of rejection. And then there's that, but there's also pride, and that we want to appear we are better than we are.
What's so interesting is I really do think that pride
it's the root of so many things.
Is the root of so many things. And I also think that pride, like if we have fear and pride together, and I think we kind of like decide what to do with that. And if we aren't careful, our fear leads to more pride. Like we either are honest and open and vulnerable about that fear, or we mask it, and look at that. We mask that fear. And I think like it's really, like, I know that we're in this like day of like pop psychology, and everything is really like every villain is really like innocent.
Tragic.
Yeah. And there's some truth in that. Like, I mean, that's not denying trauma.
There's reasons why we are the way we are.
But like, so let's use the movie Cruella de Vil, or Cruella, whatever it's called. Yeah, like
I haven't seen that yet.
I think we referenced that a while ago, but like in the movie, really it like tries to show like why she's bad. But it's like ultimately she made this choice to not deal with those issues, and to be prideful. And I really. I've studied on, because we're going through this series.
You've studied the movie Cruella.
Yeah. No, that's my wife. But He is Greater Than Tradition, the series we're doing coming up next month. And really, like, that's what happens in hypocrisy is they deceive themselves, so they forget like that they have a mask on.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of pride. Like, they so don't want to deal with the truth of where they stand with God, of their issues, that they began to just wear this mask constantly. That's the issue.
And I think that fear and pride, the more we practice it, because it really is a practice, like because you're choosing it, so you're practicing it, it becomes our internal script, that this is who we are. And ultimately, and we see this in the New Testament with the Pharisees, this is what ultimately gives way to self-righteousness.
Yeah.
And so we begin to think that these things we're doing compensate for who we are on the inside, that these
Right.
actions are actually covering up our sin, our brokenness, our need for God. And that's not the case. And you've got some passages, where Jesus talks about this.
Yeah. So, and Jesus in Matthew 6, says, he's talking in the Sermon on the Mount, and he says, when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret, and your Father who is in secret will reward you. And he's really saying, like, your motivation for your religion can't be to be seen by others. And I think we're in the day of Insta Christians, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have Instagram, and so much of Christianity, specifically from leaders, is about being seen by others and how we're perceived by others. And I don't know that in Boggy Bayou, we're thinking about it that way, but certainly, like, in love, like, I think a lot of our members, maybe it's Facebook for a lot of them, but, like, it's still the same thing. Like, we're projecting this godly image, and we're not really dealing with who we are. And, I think that, man, we have to examine our hearts, and probably have to have other believers who are examining our hearts, because it's so easy to just, like, you're going to find people who applaud your religion. I put religion in quotes if you're listening today. You're going to find
because
that.
it looks good. And the danger in this, well, one of the dangers in this is that the longer you do this, like, the greater the gap becomes for who you actually are to what you're projecting.
Yeah.
And so the longer you are projecting and wearing a mask, really the bigger this gap comes between what's reality in your heart and the image.
Yeah.
And I think that distance can only grow. There eventually is a breaking point where, like, if you think about these are two objects moving farther and farther apart. There becomes a point where nothing can sustain that gap anymore, and there is a breaking point. Whether it's internal or external, I think there's a breaking point, and that's where you see a lot of people give up. They either that's when we see publicly leaders fall because of moral discretion that's indiscretion that's been come to light, and really that's a symptom of, like, not bringing this to the Lord and trying to handle it on your own. Or we've seen it even publicly with a lot of public high profile Christians in Deconstruction, where it's like this gap has widened, and all of a sudden they're totally walking away from the faith.
Yeah, we referenced that last week, and you make a good point. I think that, like, what happens is when, so Driscoll, for example, you build this brand, but there's these issues that you haven't dealt with. And the bigger it just becomes so big that to deal with it would cause a true deconstruction of a sense. And I think, like, for us, like, it's hard to relate to these Christian celebrities, but I do think they give us extreme examples that we can look back on our own lives. And I think, when a lot of pastors who leave the ministry say they feel so relieved, like, part of that is they haven't dealt with heart issues. They've been projecting something that they are as a spiritual personality, because maybe they're not on Instagram, but they're in front of 100, 200, 500,000 people, and projecting an image, and then they've never dealt with it. And finally, like, I don't have to project that image anymore.
Yeah. Exactly. Go ahead.
But I think, like, we've erred in the deconstruction movement. And for those who don't know that, like, it's just all these famous Christians essentially publicly deconstructing. We need to go there in just a second. But like, okay, now I don't feel the pressure to pretend like I'm a Christian anymore. Okay. But you're still not dealing with the issue of your heart before God,
Absolutely. And I think we could personally feel this, as a pastor, because you're, what Christians are striving to do, like, as we are following Jesus, our goal is to, follow him in every area of our lives. So the difference really, like as a person, my role as a pastor, or, as a human, and my calling as a pastor,
as a human species,
robot,
as a Homo sapien,
alien robot. But it's like essentially my life is no different than another Christian. It's just we have different callings as far as occupation and calling as a pastor.
You just got those golden pipes, though.
So it's like the difference is that my life gets played out on this public sphere because of my role as a pastor.
Right.
So there is a different pressure. But I think, the average leader in our church somewhat feels this pressure as well. Like I need to have this all together. And when alluding back to your teaching a few weeks ago, we do as a church have to make space for people to wrestle with those moments when we're not okay. And I think you feel this as a pastor, as a leader, you feel this like, I will have things going on in my own heart that I know I'm dealing with or I'm trying to deal with. And then Sunday comes and I've got to stand in front of people and, you're leading from, and I think that's where the best leaders lead from that place of like that humble brokenness of like, I don't have it all together, but we're going to Jesus because he does. But I think the tension is when we feel that pressure. And I think sometimes that pressure is like internal pressure. And I think there is sometimes pressure from the people of the church, like, to perform and just
dance, monkey, dance.
Just do it. Make me feel good. But like to just pretend
Actually,
that
we're
everything's
Baptist.
okay.
Don't dance, monkey.
Don't move
You're dancing too much, monkey.
Keep your hands folded
in the 8 o'clock service.
Like, does that make sense? Is what I'm saying? Like that pressure you feel. And I think regardless of whether you're a pastor or not, like if you're a Christian, you probably felt this. If you're in any kind of leadership where you're in front of people sharing about the Lord, sharing about God, like as a life group leader, as a small group leader, as a, like you feel that pressure of like, there is, I'm living this out in front of people. And so I've got to pretend like I'm better than I really am right now.
Yeah. Do you feel that pressure? I mean, do you?
There's times. Yeah, absolutely. I do. Because it's not like I'm like, if I were just to get up and be like, guys, I'm just really struggling this Sunday. Like, I think there's a place for that where you can admit, but like you do, like, it comes back to me in my own personal life. Like I've got to be seeking Jesus, and that is okay to not be okay every moment as long as I'm seeking him. And that's where you want to lead people. But there is that pressure of like, hey, you've got to be good, be better, like have it appear like it's okay. I think, and maybe that's more internal pressure.
Do you ever feel like you're wearing a mask?
Yeah. I think that's, I think people say that's Baptist. I don't think it's Baptist. I think it's just Christianity in the South a lot. Like,
right.
How are you? I'm blessed. I'm, like some people that's genuine. How you doing? Fine. Like, okay, how you really doing? And I think as a leader too, as a pastor, there's times where you're like, you're also thinking through like, is this person okay to share with? Because you can't share openly with everyone because you don't know if this person's actually safe to share with. But there are some you can be real with, and they're like, hey, I get it. Thankful for those people.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I think that the reason, if I'm not open and honest about how I feel, it's not because of self-preservation for the most part. It's because of community preservation. Like you said, like, just for whatever reason, I think people like to tear down leaders, it's always been that case, but we live in a heightened time where authority is not trusted and people really want to discredit authority, specifically if that authority is the representative that says to them things should change in their life. So I think like I don't want to do anything that would jeopardize that. And probably I go above that, like, and to protect my family too, like, I'm just not going to share very openly about struggles Christy and I have, because there are people who will gossip about that and, it will go to the wrong person. So I think that you feel that, the weight of that, and it is good to have people who you can be honest with. But, we've experienced close personal friends that essentially, have for whatever reason, I mean, I know why, but, kind of betrayed that trust. And so it's hard, but I think for me, like, at the end of the day, like, I feel this great freedom that if this is not what the Lord wanted me to do, I just walk away, like I don't feel there's no, when I look at people like Joshua Harris, and you can Google that, like in his Deconstruction, I feel like, and I don't know him, but it seems like there was this other motivation keeping him going that was probably bigger than just love for Christ. And it was this love for applause of man.
Love for self and love for
applause. And God in his grace got rid of that in me. Like, I mean, I don't know, like, I've had to do things like get rid of really not be on social media and stuff like that because I do feel it, you know?
Right. Yeah. It is a tension you feel. It's like I was telling a long time ago, I remember having this conversation with a pastor talking about like in leading worship, and he was the teaching pastor. And I was like, it's crazy because it's like, you're like in the moment and you're like, man, like, this is, God, you're so good. And then like the next second you're like, and we sound great, you know?
Yeah.
And then you're like, Lord, no, I want to focus on you. And I was like, I just feel that pressure, you know, like I want, you know, and he was like, well, and I was like, I just struggle with that. And he was like, well, here's what you can rest assured is that you're aware of your struggle. And that's the Holy Spirit convicting you. And so God's at work, you know? And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. That's helpful. But it is that like, you have to like be aware of like pride.
Sorry,
your
my phone's
phone
on
off,
vibrate,
silence your
y'all.
phones. But you have to be aware of that pride that seeks validation. I think that is a lot of the root of hypocrisy. Yeah. I think that's the root of like, I think honestly, you know, evaluating the Joshua Harris struggle, you know, like his very public deconstruction. And now he is, you know, publicly trying to make money off helping other people deconstruct.
He pulled that away.
You know, and I think that was a wise move.
The deconstruction movement was
but then
not
you're
ready
like,
for him.
But then you're like, also, was pulling it down like a marketing move? You know, I don't know, but that's the cynic in me. But I think like ultimately that is rooted in some level of pride, because I think even public deconstruction is like, I'm going to deconstruct publicly. And what we mean by deconstruction, in case you don't know, is like people who've claim to be Christians who then are deconstructing their faith and evaluating all the reasons why they don't believe anymore. And it's usually, and I think there are some valid points that people have, they bring up, you know, but a lot of times this is the reason, and not
deconstruction in itself is not all a bad thing. I know like some of our older members, like they are so upset about, you know, the wokeness and all the stuff. And I'm like, I get where they're going, but the look at how we've done things and deconstructing some of the things that weren't of Christ or are neutral things that don't work anymore. Like those, that's okay. It's just when the deconstruction begins to be something, I really, you said it, the danger is somebody who's leading this deconstruction or whatever looking for validation of man. Because sometimes if you go into an establishment, it's already established, you don't really have a place. But if you deconstruct, then now you have the segment of people who like what you're saying in the church.
And then you've got validation for yourself. If deconstruction for deconstruction's sake is the point, then it's wrong. Because if you're just deconstructing to deconstruct, but if the point is to get rid of things that don't belong so that you can reconstruct in the right and healthy way, great. But I think so much of it is it's like people are searching for this validation, and that's the root of hypocrisy. Right. Isn't the root of hypocrisy like looking for validation? Like, I'm going to present one way because I want you to validate this so that I can feel justified for not really being this way, or, you know, I want you to validate. I'm looking for validation for this. It's just we're just seeking root of its pride.
Yeah, and that's what Jesus is dealing with, you know, and really the minor prophets are dealing with too. You know, he says that you basically, you know, your fear of God is the commandments of men in Isaiah. And he's saying, you know, basically you're looking to man for, you know, your approval and your security. And that's really what Jesus is dealing with. And I think, you know, the key is what is the heart of God, and are we doing the things of the heart of God? And I think often, like on both sides, like the religious hypocrites and the non-religious hypocrites, you know, it's still not like, what is the heart of God? Like if you're not loving people, then you're really missing it. And that's Jesus gave us this great examination of, do we love God? Of saying, is there love for people in my life? And ultimately, like if we don't have people speaking into that, then we're probably not really looking for godly people speaking into that. We're probably not looking for the right motivation. So what I would just say is like, you know, we need to lovingly call out hypocrisy using the scripture, because we need to keep our eyes on Jesus. Paul said, am I now seeking the approval of man or of God?
Right.
You know, like, so our validation comes from God. Yeah. And what's amazing about that is he validated us in the cross. So like our value isn't appraised, it's declared by Christ. And so
Come on.
I just respond to that. And then, you know, hey, here's the truth. And I love you. And, Yeah, have mercy on those who doubt. Jude
Yeah.
says, have mercy on those who doubt. So if people are like, okay, but I don't know if I believe that, like, all right, well, let's walk together.
Yep.
I don't know why you said it in that high-pitched voice, but
Whoa.
let's walk together.
Like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. We're here for you.
Yeah, and I think the calling out of hypocrisy is another point is that it's most effective or often most effective in proximity. So you're gonna receive that best from people that you're close to, and people are going to receive it best if they're close to you, not from shouting it across the room. Now, there can be times, absolutely, where that's necessary, talking about, but ultimately, talking about personal, it's going to happen best when there's someone who knows you and can speak that truth.
Yeah.
And so that's why life groups, that's why even not just life groups, but accountability in those life groups is so important. Why our community groups, small groups, whatever your church, if you're listening, has, but people, like it happens best in that. And then ultimately it comes back to Jesus.
Yeah.
What Jesus says, Matthew 11, he says, come to me, those who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest. And I think so much of our mask wearing is because we are not coming to Jesus for rest. We're not resting in his sufficiency. Going back to the moments where I feel like I have to wear a mask sometimes, like it comes back to my not resting in his sufficiency. He goes on to says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I'm gentle and humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls. So really the root of hypocrisy, the root of mask wearing is this pride that thinks it's up to us and not rest in who Jesus is. And so we've got to do that. Like that's the answer. Take off the mask, you know? Like,
and just want to be clear, like, we've primarily dealt with how religion is used as a mask, right? Like, so I'm religious now, so I feel good about me and I don't have to deal with these issues of me. And understandably, those are more criticized. But, Jesus also criticized people who money was their mask. And I certainly think in our community, this is an affluent community with a lot of young families who are probably have a lot of means and or are living beyond their means. And I think like, that's a way that people are wearing a mask. I think,
having well-rounded children or like children who are successful is another form of a mask. Like if as a parent, if my children are successful, it kind of compensates for how I feel that's another example of stuff.
Yeah. Busying ourselves up,
success,
right?
Like busyness,
with our families. I think, projecting an image with our marriage. I mean, we've talked about before on here how I've known people who are going through heartache and then their Instagram post is how much they love their husband. It's like, you literally just told me yesterday the opposite, don't act like why are you doing that? Projecting that image. But I'll say that, for me, like our church, I love our church. Our church is full of great people, but definitely the hypocrisy that exists in our church and any church I've been a part of can be discouraging. Mm-hmm. And, as a believer, you're like, oh man, like, is it really worth it? And so I'd rather go to the church where I can just show up, and leave, or I don't want to go. And like, as a pastor, you're like, there are moments where you're like, this is exhausting, mm-hmm. But I've always thought about it. Like the bigger danger for me, knowing what the Bible teaches about sin and knowing my heart is for me not to be in biblical community and left to my own devices.
Whew, that is dangerous.
than to be in a group of dysfunctional people, who are figuring out together. Because and if we really believe the Bible, like we understand, like if you really have the mentality of I am better than all these other Christians, so I don't need them. Mm-hmm. Like you, A, don't know what the scripture teaches, and B, are in a dangerous, prideful place.
Right. Yeah. And humble yourself.
I love the story of like the two bank robbers. They go in and one wears a mask and one doesn't. And so like the one who doesn't wear a mask, like the police come and they capture him and they're like, hey, you're going to jail. And he's like, well, at least I was honest about what I was doing. I wasn't trying to hide what I was doing. And it was like, so you think that makes you less guilty?
Right.
Like because you weren't wearing a mask, you still. And so I think like we live in this day of like, well, I was honest about how terrible I am. And it's like, you're still terrible.
Right.
Like you still have to deal with the terribleness.
Right. And I know we're going long, but we're going to wrap it up. But I think that is another point of this is that in our honesty, we don't just stay like in like here's how messed up I am, period. Like we then say, okay, now we go to Jesus.
Right.
I think there's so much happening in church culture where it's like, let's be honest and vulnerable, which we should be. And that's where it's stopping. And it's not like, it's not actually doing what Jesus says, who says, come to me. It's like, we're saying like, I am weary and I am burdened. Good. Me too. I feel you, period. And then we're like, but Jesus says, okay, so now come to me.
Could you imagine like somebody going to a therapist and then being like, here's all my issues. Yep. You have a lot of issues. Cool beans. See you next week. It's like, no, help them.
Yeah. Like here's what we need to do. And so that's just where
cool beans. Who says cool beans? That was so derogatory.
Cool beans.
Sorry. Okay. You had like this serious moment. I was trying to build on the serious moment.
And then you said cool beans. Well,
because I clearly had a picture in my head of who I was.
Well, speaking of cool beans, join us next week.
My coffee has gotten cold.
Well, hey, if you are listening and this resonates with you and you want to talk some more, we would love to follow up with you, love to talk to you. Reach out, please send us a message. We would be happy just to share a little bit more. And if you've been hurt by a hypocrite, our encouragement is this, people, we as Christians, we are called to represent Christ, but none of us do that perfectly. And I don't say that to make light or demean any level of hurt, but we want to help you walk through that and deal with that and reconcile that. So please reach out. And next week we
what
wrap
if they
up.
are a hypocrite?
What we all are.
How do we help them?
How do we help? I'm a hypocrite.
Hypocrites Anonymous. It's a group
That's right.
starting next week.
We all are hypocrites. So from one hypocrite to another, Jesus is better and he's good. Join us next week. We're going to wrap up this 4-part series on fear, and we are going to be talking about monsters.
I like that.
Yeah. So join us for that. That's it. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.